Joining me now, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. We've talked about this before. You live there, you know folks there. Where does this resilience and this hopefulness come from in the midst of this horror?
Chris, it is a horror. It is a horror. And the Ukrainians have shown to be very strong, not just their military, but as you've just described, their people, their mothers, their families, they're taking care of each other. The answer to your question is Ukrainians take care of each other. They organize themselves. They don't wait for the government to do it. They don't wait for somebody else to come do it for them. They organize themselves. They bring that strength to themselves. So they will make it through this. They will win. They know they will win.
The Secretary General of NATO talked about this today, and I want to play a little bit of that for you, Ambassador. Let's take a listen.
What we have seen over now several months are horrific attacks against civilians, residential areas, critical civilian infrastructure, and also against schools and hospitals, with a high number of civilian casualties. Intentional targeting of civilian infrastructure and civilians is a war crime.
We often make a lot, Ambassador, of using that phrase, war crime, but does it have any meaning, really? And what can be done?
Of course, it does have meaning. It does have meaning. There are war crimes taking place every day. Every time the Russians target a civilian hospital, a civilian apartment, every time a civilian dies at the hands of another strike from the Russians, that's another war crime. What's to be done? They need to be held accountable. And for that to happen, the Ukrainians need to win. The international community has to step up and support. The Ukrainian justice system is already in action. The international community has recognized this for war crimes. This is war criminal activity. This is terrorist activity. This is actually an attempt by the Russians, Chris, to wipe out the Ukrainians, from the map. This is genocide. So this has to be held accountable. The Russians have to be held accountable. The leadership of Russia has to be held accountable. And this will come. And the Ukrainians will win, and they'll be held accountable.
Will they? I guess that's the source of my skepticism. Like, what will happen? I was watching President Putin meeting with mothers of Russian soldiers who were killed in the war. Just today, he said, "Oh, we share your pain." I mean, I'm not sure that most Russian mothers who have lost their children, women who have lost their husbands, aren't onto him. But what happens to Vladimir Putin? We know that there are war crimes. We know what's happening, but what happens to Vladimir Putin?
The Russians will answer that question, Chris. The Russians will answer what happens to Vladimir Putin. He's losing this war. Often, when dictators lose wars, they lose their jobs, and they might lose more than that. So Russians will determine Vladimir Putin's fate. However, as I say, he'll be held accountable. Putin will be held accountable. There are no statute of limitations on war crimes, on wars of aggression, on genocide. There are no statute of limitations. He will be tracked down. He will be unable to travel for the rest of his life. He will be held accountable.
Ambassador Bill Taylor, on this Thanksgiving weekend, we are grateful to you for the expertise you bring to us so often. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Chris. You too.